What's up guys, Sean the Bro here, and today we're going to be going over Blend Spaces Part 2. And this is where Blend Spaces really start to shine, because we're going to be going over Blend Space 2D. And what this does is it will allow you to take in two variables, two factors, and determine what your animation should be. So we were using Blend Space 1D before, which was good for moving specific parts of the body, but not really good for moving like we were using it for. So instead, you can keep all the Blend Space 1D stuff that's related to that, whether it be different types of hits or attacks, and all that other good stuff. But for our actual movement Blend Space, we're going to adjust it to work with the direction we are moving. See, if I move left or right, the animation changes and fits it. He probably walks a little bit fast for the given animation, but the direction is correct. And you can see you can even walk diagonal, and he walks diagonal. And if you walk forward, then I have kind of like a little jogging animation. But I can change it as much as I like to meet all the given directions I'll move in. And it does go with speed. Right now, especially on a keyboard, I only have one speed I can run, because I don't have any sort of joystick or analog stick to give it, a greater or lesser value. But you can see that it does work with the direction, and it will work with the speed in scenarios where it is given. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be all about Blend Spaces today. It's not going to be about the Action RPG tutorial series, which is the series that I'm using and adding this to. You don't have to know anything about this series to make this code in Logic work, so don't worry. I'm going to just be covering Blend Spaces from the ground up, basically, and how you can put them into your animation blueprint. Alright. So first things first, we need to make a new blend space. Now we've done this before, but we never technically made this type of blend space, so we'll go over the entire thing. I put it in just where I have my animations for my characters. I right click, go to animation, and blend space. Now blend space 1D is what we used before, where you have one variable, one dimension, one thing that's changing the animations. With a blend space, you can have two different things that are affecting it here. You can have a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. And so once you've created that, name it whatever you want. I just called it movement blend space. Then you can set up your two axes, and these are your two variables that are going to determine what animation you go into. So you can use this for more than movement, but you can only use two things at a time. So every time you'll need a different factor involved, you'll probably want to do another blend space for a different animation. For our movement, we just care about direction and speed. So you can set these up like mine if you want. This is pretty much the standard with the way Unreal Engine 4 and Unreal Engine 5 works. So we have direction on the horizontal axis. You can also do it on the vertical axis, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because direction like left, right, up, down, and then speed from 0 to 600 makes more sense. So I put direction on the horizontal axis, speed on the vertical axis, and then for the minimum values, we want to have -180 to 180. So minimum in direction is -180. The maximum in direction is 180. And when you put those together, that's 360 degrees. I mean, you have -180 minus 180, which would be -360, or you have 180 minus -180, so 360. Either way you do it, you have 360 degrees. So if you add their absolute values together, you have 360 degrees. And thus, that's a full circle, which means you have every given direction. Now, this is important because your direction here can be left, right, backward, and forward. Of course, you have your diagonals in between. But you should be able to start walking left, and then walk backward, and walking right, and walk backward. So we want the full range here. I never touched this other stuff. There are some important things there, but not really for this episode. Then for the vertical axis, we want speed, and then the standard is to pretty much use 0 for the minimum and 600 for the maximum. Alright. And now, nothing here will mean anything until you can see it on the screen, but I do like setting those things up first because it kind of lets us know ahead of time what we're looking for, what kind of results we walks backward. The character walks right, and then walks backward. And then I have basically the same things as before here, but at a different speed instead of being idle and walking those directions, or just speed. So both speed and direction take effect here. So let me go in the middle. So speed 0, direction 0, it looks like this, which is our idle animation, which is what we want. So if you want to follow this graph exactly, then I'll go ahead and label these for you. So this one right here where the green dot is, you can just move it around to see where your animation is at that point. This is where you want to bring in your idle animation, right in the middle bottom here. So I have assassin idle that I was using, and then I also called these, the ones that are just A underscore for assassin underscore, and then the state, are all about the blend space stuff. So A idle default goes right here, and that's what it looks like. Okay, I did put idle in the corners as well, because, you know, in case you have these different directions here but there's 0 speed, you probably still want to be idle. If you want to be really safe, or if you get more complex blend spaces, you can put them in every slot. So no matter your direction, idle will always look like this. Okay? But the most important one is the one in the middle here, when speed is 0. Because your character might be turning anyway when you rotate, and thus it's not really going to matter if there's a direction when they're not moving. They will just stay in place anyway. The important ones are up here. So now we have to pick a speed at which we want to perform our next, our first animation in a blend space. So you can see that I was jogging when I was playing, again, because I'm on keyboard and I'm basically getting to this value right away. But I do have different values. So this is like a slight jog, and this is just a straight up walk. So if I'm only giving it a speed of 300, that's the halfway mark that is right here, then I'm doing this walk animation. So I have assassin walk forward default, and that's what this looks like. Now, I'm going to change these animations a bit for me to be able to use them. So just in case, like, I get all these animations off Mixamo. So if you want to get your animations off Mixamo, first of all, if you don't know how to do it, there's an iCard right here in the top right corner that should help you. But once you have the animations in, let me show you what I did. So I could only find a walk forward animation that I wanted. And I couldn't find a walk backward, but I duplicated my walk forward animation. Called it walk backward. And it's basically the same thing, but I've changed the rate scale to be -1 on the actual animation. And that basically flips the entire animation. So now that you've seen that, you can see we're walking here. We're walking forward here. If the direction is 0, it's straight ahead of where our character is, and the speed is at least 300, or around 300. It is a blend space, so you can see if I have a really low walking speed, I can still technically walk like this. It's like my tiptoe speed. Alright. Let's say we're exactly at 300. This is what it looks like. Now, direction comes in, and say we start turning to the right. You can see his legs start turning that direction. It's trying to blend the walk right. Which looks like this. Okay, it's trying to blend the walk right, which you can see looks just like that, with the walk forward. So as I go this way, you can see his body starts to turn, and he starts walking to the right. Now, I put that at the halfway mark between 0 and 180, so this is 90 degrees. And that makes sense, because if a circle is 360 degrees, then this is a 90-degree segment. Okay? And then if we do another 90 degrees, we're going to be walking backward, which is why we blend the character like this. And now you can see he's walking backward. So 180 degrees is the opposite direction. And you see diagonal also works. If I'm in the middle here, he's going both back and to the right. So he's going diagonal in the direction we expect. Of course, it's the same with the other way. You can see we go from standing forward to walking to the left. Okay? Forward, left. Diagonal back. Back. So, to recap, walk forward, walk right, walk back, walk left, walk back. And then for this, I did not have like a jog, left, right, all those. So I actually used the same animations, like walk right, walk back, walk left, and walk back. But the first one is going to be the run, the assassin run. And that's why you can see he's doing this nice little jog here. But if I go into my other directions, he still does the same walk. That's on purpose, because I didn't have any other animations that would go with the directions that I wanted, that were him walking a little bit faster. So I can instead just increase my straight up jog speed, you know, my initial speed, or my initial animation, for if I'm just going completely straight. Alright? So that's how we make the blend space. And now the blend space is made, I mean, we're pretty good. You can see all this stuff here on the side. You can change a bunch of stuff about all of this, but you usually don't have to. I usually do it all through the graph, but you can. Whatever's easier for you. Then, if we go into our animation blueprint. Now, you don't have to, again, know anything about this series to follow this. So this is an animation blueprint that I have. Just to show you, you can go into Add New, Animation, Animation Blueprint, and then it will ask you to pick the skeleton. Pick the same skeleton that you just put the blend space on. So you can go into here and you have to pick the parent class that you want to make an animation blueprint for. Usually we pick Anim Instance unless you have a reason to pick a different one. Then you're going to pick the skeleton that you want to pick. So mine is the Knight di Pellegrini skeleton. Alright, I'm going to cancel this because I've already made mine, but in case you don't have yours yet, you can create it like that. You just want to pick the same skeleton that has the blend space that you just made. Okay? And in the anim graph, I have some added things in here that we were using from the last straight up blend space episode. I'm going to remove it now because we no longer want to use that for movement. We can still use it for hit reactions and different punch types, but we don't want to use it for movement. So we're going to ignore that. And here's our default state machine going to our output pose. Nothing weird there. Just a regular state machine. Now the important part here is there should be two states. You can ignore everything else. This is all related to the third-person tutorial series. We care about idle, and we care about move. So if you're making this from scratch, you will automatically have this entry node. Drag off, add state. Okay, and I already have it, but you're going to make an idle, and you're going to make a move. Let's start with idle. Idle, it just needs to play your default idle animation. You can technically mix idle and move since it's in a blend space. However, I do like having idle as its own state, because if you have it as its own state, you can still cancel out of it and go to other things without canceling out of the blend space. Like, if you have, you know, a multitude of animations that your character can go to from idle, maybe you want to make the blend space specifically for when you're moving, but you can still be in idle when you're standing still. I know we set up the idle stuff in the blend space, but there's no reason why you have to use it when you could just have an idle state that you could transfer out of. So I go ahead and I put my default animation in here. Set it to be looping because it is the idle, and that's actually it for the idle. Everything else is going to come with the move. So drag two transitions, one from idle to move and move to idle, like that. And you can go into the new state. And we're going to drag in our blend space for the move. So you can just flat out drag this in from the asset browser. And you can drag it into the output animation pose. Now, it's going to require variables because, of course, we need to give it the values that it's looking for to determine the animation. Now, you can make them here, or if you already have them, great. Specifically, if you're using one of Unreal's template animation blueprints, or if you were following the third-person tutorial, you'll have a character speed. but otherwise we can make it all now. So a good way to do it is either make 2 float variables, like that, and make another one, or you can just drag off of these and hit promote to variable. Either way is good. I called mine character direction and character speed. Now right now they're not going to be assigned to anything, so they won't do anything, but it will let you use this blend space node here. So as long as we set them, you will be able to see the proper values. Alright, and since we have those variables now, we can go over the transition rules. Basically, we only want to go from idle to move if we're moving, and we only want to go from move back to idle if we're not moving. I give it a little bit of error just in case there's any sort of drift, but you can use whatever values you want here. Basically, idle to move should be, we should check if our character speed is greater than a certain value. Again, it could really be 0 if you wanted, and then just enter this transition. So quite literally, get character speed. If it's greater than, float, and then your value, 1.0. And move to idle is just as simple, just the opposite. We do character speed, get. I do less than or equal to in this case, but you could also just do less than. It would just, if you happen to have exactly 1.0 at any point, then you wouldn't be able to take that transition. So you'd have to know that you're comfortable doing that. And then can enter transition. Okay. So setting it up in the state machine is very easy. The only other thing we have to do to get this working is set up the values in the event graph so that our variables in the AnimBP work. Okay, so this is what we're going to be setting up, but let me show you where this comes from. So we have blueprint begin play and blueprint update animation. Now, these will be separate if you just made a new AnimBP. You don't have to put them together here. What I like to do is put these 2 things together. I do usually separate them, but I will put them together for a few things. Like normally I will try and do both the try get pawn owner, the cast of the character, and setting the character reference in both the blueprint update animation and the begin play. Now this tutorial series, the 3rd person tutorial series, hasn't gone far enough where I've switched that up and made these separate things. So if you're making this from scratch, feel free to just do this if you want, but it's up to you. It doesn't matter. This other AnimBP stuff might not be in here if you made one completely from scratch and didn't copy, so you can feel free to copy what's going on here, but this is all default Unreal stuff. Basically what we're doing is we're trying to get the pawn owner, so the owner of this animation blueprint. We're then casting it to the type that we want, so our character. Then we're setting a variable that I'm calling character reference, just so I can use this later. To do this, you can drag off and promote to variable. Now, this was default Unreal stuff. Really, this should be happening before this stuff. You should check if the pawn owner is valid before using it here. Okay, and then the animation blueprint goes on to set is an error, the boolean. Again, not important. The important part, and this can be done in any order, I just want to show you. So off of begin play and blueprint update animation, you can do whatever you have to do beforehand or whatever's in there from your other animation blueprint. But the important part is at some point we want to set our character speed and our character direction in this. It doesn't have to be in begin play, but it does have to be in blueprint update animation because your character speed and your character direction are going to be potentially constantly changing. So speed is pretty simple. What we need to do is drag off of our try get pawn owner that we have, which remember is our character. Try get pawn owner is the owner of this AnimBP essentially, and you can also use the character reference if you have been following this series, or if you're familiar with this, the way that I'm handling this. You can also do it right off the character reference, or you can just use try get pawn owner. It's not a big deal either way, but that's what this blue node is. Either way, you're going to drag off of it and you're going to type get velocity. Off of that, you can get vector length, but don't type get. It's actually just vector length in this case. Always confuses me when I do it. So just type vector length. This one right here. And this will return a float, and basically it converts the velocity to a float, to a scalar value that you can use here. So then you go ahead and set character speed to that. The easiest way to do it is to drag character speed into the blueprint, click set, and drag the float into the other node here. And that's actually it for our character speed. Now we have to set a direction. Also off of the character reference or the pawn owner, whatever you're using, you can get the active rotation. Just like that. And you can do something called calculate direction. Now you don't want to drag off of the rotator return value here. This is actually, calculate direction is actually part of the anim instance class, the NMBP parent. So you're going to want to do calculate direction just out in the open here. The target can be self. And then you pass in the rotation, and you're actually going to want this velocity that we use for the speed. It returns a value, and that value that it returns, as it says, the range of return will be from -180 to 180. This can be used to feed blend space directional value. So that's exactly what we want. So you can set character direction right off of that. Okay? Delete this because I already have it. And you can see it's all right here. So this is setting all the variables we need for our character to be able to use the blend space. Now, that would be pretty much it, but there's one more thing I want to cover. Alright, so if we go into our base character VP, or whatever character this is, if this is a side-scroller character, it doesn't matter, you don't have to make your own character. Click on the base of the character here in the hierarchy. Scroll down the details panel until you see use controller rotation yaw. So I'm going to turn mine off because it was off by default. Let me show you what this looks like. So this is what it looked like before. I was moving the character and it moves with the keys. Now that's good, okay? That makes sense. You know, you may want to move with the keys and not just move looking straight the whole time. But if you do that, the direction is always going to be forward. See that? So you can always do this jog thing no matter what direction he's facing. I can't get him to do anything else. So maybe this is what you want for when you're just moving around freely. But say when you lock on an enemy, if you've ever played Dark Souls or a game like that where you have lock on, you can lock onto the enemy and your character constantly faces the opponent, but I can still do things like back away from them. I just won't rotate, you know, the way I'm walking. I will be backing away. To do that, you can use controller rotation yaw. If I enable this, then when I play the game, you can see I can use my blend space because the character looks the same direction the whole time. Okay, so if I'm locking onto my opponent, maybe I want to enable that so I can back away while I'm locking onto them. Just like that. Okay? That's a pretty easy way to fix that issue. To, you know, fix up whether you want to be locking the character when they're walking or if you want them to move freely. And you can enable it and disable it to your liking. So it's pretty easy to use in different situations. So sometimes you may want to use your blend space like this. Sometimes you may not. Sometimes you might want to just use a standard running animation, and sometimes you may not. But that's all I got for you today, guys. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed and this helps you learn a little bit about blend spaces, please subscribe. It does more for the series and more for the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters and subscribers. Thank you guys for continuing to give me support and love about these series. I love working on them, and I'm so excited that you are as happy with them as I am, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support us on Twitch or just come hang out with me during some of the live streams, I do live streams on Twitch Monday and Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and on Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, here's a video to the last side-scroller live stream that we did where we covered swapping characters, being able to possess different pawns in the middle of the game. That's all I got for you today, guys, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Sean the Bro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.